Some things are not as apparent in the beginning of a watch collector's journey, so to speak, and become more apparent as you go along and you've seen more watches, held more watches, worn more watches. You start to notice the subtle differences between what makes one watch a little bit better than the next. And some of them are very subtle. And for me, if you've followed the channel, you'll know that I've naturally attracted to high polish on watches because it has a premium look to it, right? A brushed surface generally belongs on a tool watch, and I've said this before, tool watches don't really exist anymore. Everything you wear on your wrist that tells the time is essentially jewelry because all the tool watches have been replaced with modern counterparts that are far superior when it comes to measuring the different things that are required that those tool watches measured. But for nostalgia, they're still being made, and of course people remember them from maybe days gone by where they actually used one like me and my Citizen ProMaster. But it's all jewelry, and jewelry is generally high polish, right? It shines. So I've always been attracted to that, but what I thought was high polish in the beginning was actually just a regularly polished surface. There wasn't that much work put into it. It's not until I started looking at true high polish, right? Like the Zaratsu polishing that you see on a Grand Seiko or some of the older high-end model Seikos. And to demonstrate that point, I've got two watches today. They're both Seikos. They're both vintage, right? This is to really show you how high polish can last. And what I want you to pay attention to is how the light reflects off these particular surfaces, but most importantly, the finer details that you'll see on a higher-end watch. The two watches in question are the Seikomatic 6245-9000, the one that became the first automatic Grand Seiko. And I've got a 5206-6060 from 1971 that is a Lord Matic. It was sort of a median level product. It wasn't the higher level product that the Seikomatic was. So the level of finishing they put on that does not equal the level of finishing you'll see on the Seikomatic, and pay close attention to the indices because that's somewhere that most companies will kind of cut corners because they don't think people will notice, but when you see it under the lights, you notice, and you notice it right away. And that's why with an outfit like this, I would choose to wear my Seikomatic like 9 times out of 10. This is what I'm going with because it has that elevated aesthetic, right? That luxury look to it because of the high polish they use absolutely everywhere to make this watch catch the light and stand out. Let's get into the comparison of the two. Now I chose these two specific watches because I didn't want to influence you due to case shape, right? The case profiles of these particular watches are very similar. They're both 36mm cases. They have both short lugs. They essentially wear the same on wrist, but the one picks up the light significantly better than the other. And that's because of the level of polishing. Now, both of these watches do incorporate high polishing. It's just the Lord Matic doesn't use nearly as much as the Seikomatic. The only area of high polish on this particular watch is this little rim at the bezel. That's it. That's the only area that has true high polish on it. And it's the only area that casts a little bit of an actual reflection when you look at it directly in the right light. Whereas the Seikomatic has high polish along the sides, high polish on the indices, of course, high polish on the hands, right? This casts a reflection from practically any angle you look at it. And that's why it picks up the light so much better than the Lord Matic. And the cost to create a case and dial design like this versus one like this is significantly higher because of that high polish. That's the real difference. And there was a time where I'd look at this Lord Matic and be like, oh, it's mostly all polish, right? Because I would look at these sides, right, and assume they're polished, but really they're not. It really isn't. This is just a light polish that brings out the natural shine of the stainless steel, but it's not a high polish. I used to consider that high polish, and it wasn't until I started seeing watches like this or Grand Seikos that I realized, oh, okay, that's not a high polish, it's just a regular polish. And this form of polish is very easy to achieve. Like, it's simple, to be honest, and there's not that much cost associated with. Whereas when you get into the Zaratsu polishing that's utilized in a case like this, it requires a lot of manual work, right? It requires an artisan to achieve it. And if you followed my channel and watched some of my other watch videos, you know that as not only is polish important to me, but legibility is important to me. And these two watches are both quite legible, but they achieve it in very different ways. And that's, the Seikomatic uses high polish everywhere. It's the polish that causes the amount of contrast between a stainless steel indice and a silver dial, essentially, right? That's what brings it out, and because of the polish on it, it's very, very legible. Now, the cost to have individually polished indices is quite high, so what they did with the Lord Matic is that this went ahead, and I believe it's just a painted surface on these indices, a painted black surface, to give you the contrast against that, again, silver, almost like silver/champagne dials, right? That's what achieves the contrast, because it's a cheaper way of doing it. It's a lot easier to run the indices, run paint across the indices in the manufacturing process than it is to have to polish them to a high polish in order to pick up the light to gain the same contrast. And again, that's why this stands out so much more than this when on wrist. Now, does this watch, or owning this watch, make this watch an inferior choice or an unnecessary choice? It doesn't, because I use them in very different situations. The Lord Matic I wear as more of a small dial sports watch, right? It's a sports watch that's also suitable for business, right? This is a great Monday to Friday on your way to the office type watch, because it can be worn with a suit. It's slim. It's a classic look and style, but at the same time, it's not all polish. It's not going to bother you if you bang it against something, if it nicks a computer or whatever. The only high polish is just this one slim little rim around the outside, so having the odd nick or scratch on it isn't going to show up day to day. That's not the case with the Seikomatic. The Seikomatic, you bang it against anything, it's going to show because of the high polished surfaces that are basically everywhere. The only area you don't have high polish is in between the lugs to add some sort of dramatic effect to it, and that gives it that extra little bit of depth because of that, but you don't want to ding this against anything. So this watch, generally speaking, I'm always wearing it in dress situations. I'm wearing it out to dinner, right? I'm wearing it to a special function. I'm wearing it at black tie. It's why it's got the black leather strap on it, because it's the most suitable combination for this particular watch. Whereas this, again, the bracelet's just versatile. You throw it on, you go, and you don't really mind if it gets a little bit worked in. So they have different purposes, and at their time of original sale, this is a 1965 model, it's a 1971, but I mean, the Seikomatic were more expensive generally than the Lord Matics when they were sold at the same time. It was a more expensive proposition, right? It was positioned higher, and it's reflected in the costs associated to making something so high polished. Just like Grand Seiko is more expensive than Seiko today, because the level of polish, the level of finishing is superior with the Grand Seiko to what you find with Seiko. But what you're comfortable with will determine the purchase you make. It's just be aware that sometimes watches are compared and really shouldn't be, because the level of finishing is significantly better on the more expensive product. And quite often I've seen people criticize a watch for its cost believing that a less expensive, even model from AliExpress, has a similar look and style to it, but costs, 5x less, 10x less in some situations. But that's because the amount of work and finishing and quality control that goes into, say, that San Martin isn't anywhere near the amount of work that goes into something like a Seikomatic, or today, like a Grand Seiko. So keep that in mind when you're deciding on which watch you're going to purchase, how much you're willing to spend, and what is your purchase dollar actually going to, because there are very popular watches on the market that are actually quite inexpensive to make all around. They don't take that extra step to do a level of high polish, a additional bevel, transitioning from the case to the lug or whatever. They skip those steps in order to save money, but they're still charging you as though they had implemented those steps. That's where maybe the cost of a watch gets a little ludicrous in some cases, because people don't take the time to really look at what goes into it. Keep that in mind for your next purchase. Till next time, if you haven't yet, please subscribe. Let me know if we're doing a good job here. I hope you enjoy the videos, and until next time.